be 50 years or like 5 or 100. I don't know. I don't even want to guess that type. So I'll skip that portion. The hype is also that AI can do everything. That is completely wrong. I mean, I'm going to be mixing AI and the ML because it's slightly the way AI is realized right now is through a lot of it is through ML, but AI is much bigger than ML. So this is a diagram that gives you an idea about artificial intelligence is a field of study. We'll say what is AI, and we'll talk about it in 2, 3 slides. It is realized mostly using machine learning. The machine learning includes what is called statistical machine learning, which has been happening for about 30 years, and what is called deep learning, which has come in, which even though started in 50s, with perceptron and all that sort of stuff, really became practical only in the last 10, 15 years, and right now it is doing amazing things in the narrow intelligence space. But deep learning is the area to be in. And both about 70 to 80% of both machine learning and deep learning right now is uses something called supervised learning, where it takes examples. The examples are essentially some inputs and some labels, and then it tries to use them to infer new things. All right. So there is a lot of these things you will hear about inference and causal inferences and that kind of stuff. Again, we are not going to go into the technology at all because it's more like an impact. The technology would take about, we normally do 2-day workshops and just describe all these terms there. Data science is, think about machine learning for business. Machine learning is the kind of tool. So when I first heard about machine learning, I was wondering, can machines learn? What do they learn? How do they learn? And it took a while for me to get grips on that kind of stuff. But let us go through some more things about AI. It is the study of intelligent agents. Any system that perceives its environment and takes actions that maximize its chance of achieving its goals. The best way to look at something like this, a dry definition like this, is to apply it to, like, let's say, automated vehicles. An automated vehicle is an intelligent agent of some on wheels, of course, that perceives its environment, looks at the road, other cars that are going in front, cars behind, cars to the side, obstacles in the way, and takes actions that maximize its chance to go to a destination, right? Without crashing on anything, without stopping, without causing any other issues and all that sort of stuff. This is from Wikipedia. So if you go to Wikipedia and just type AI, you will see this definition and then some lots of other interesting things in it. There is a very geeky version of it from Tom Mitchell, which I used to normally put, but that is, since it's very technical, I skipped it. This is my favorite. There's a person by the name Patrick Winston, passed away, a MIT professor. He builds what is artificial intelligence, and he looks at it more like a field of study. And the way you read it is from bottom to top. And there's a link to the video here. You should go and look at the first 10, 15 minutes of the video. It's really beautiful. It's thinking, perception, and action is basically intelligence. Okay. So perception is observation, learning, right? Action is taking action. And thinking is taking that information that you learned and processing it in some form. Okay. And this is built on using models. So say models targeted at thinking and learning. Representations, a model requires a representation. So the model is not the full thing. Like the model of an earth is not earth. A map is a model of the earth, but it's a kind of a very navigational model kind of stuff. Google Earth is also a kind of 3D model of the earth, but it's not the earth itself. So you will see this everywhere in machine learning, that we try to build a model of a real system and then try to simulate, the behavior or infer the behavior that we are interested in. We cannot model every aspect of the weather, and that's why we are not able to predict the weather as well as we should be able to at some point in time, in spite of throwing a lot of computing power at it, is because the weather model of Earth is a model, right? And there are a lot of variables that affect a model. So let's go to this. So AI and ML is used in sometimes, I'm going to use ML as a proxy because artificial intelligence is really a little bit more. And what we are right now practicing is a lot of machine learning, is the ability for computers to learn without being explicitly programmed. So anybody who is a programmer, so if you can program it, that's called, take the simplest example is handwriting recognition. Human beings can look at a handwriting digit. Let us take a very subset of the handwriting recognition, like digits. I can read a digit, however garbled it is, I can still read it without any problems. As long as I can see. And but we don't know how to describe the machine to read the digits. And it was an unsolved problem for a long period of time, and that is when once the neural networks came about, which is model of the brain, um, it became a simpler problem. So this is a class of problems. This is just one of them, but there are classes of problems. I can recognize Vishy wherever I see him in a crowd, even if he's not facing me. He's talking to somebody else, and he's like far away from me. I would have seen him in different angles, but he is at a very different angle, and still I'm able to recognize it. How are we able to do it? And then I'm not talking about facial recognition, which is a small subset of object recognition. How are we able to? In this case, we not only recognize the object, bring a lot of associated things about that person or about that bird or a tree or whatever. So there is human capacity is just phenomenal. So trying to mimic that is a big challenge. Do we really need to mimic it? May not be is a valid question to ask. And I think there is a professor that says we are using AI all wrong. AI is truly capable of doing something different from what human beings do, and we should leverage it for that instead of trying to just mimic humans. But hey, we understand only one form of intelligence reasonably well. Um, we still don't have grips as to what intelligence is, but based on our understanding, we want to try to model it. And so one part of it is machine learning, which is the ability of computers to learn without being. So if they're not being programmed, how will they learn? They learn from data. They learn from data. So if you give them basically an input and an output, they can infer ultimately what the machine learning algorithms produce is a function called a mapping function that maps inputs to outputs. And so that is called that mapping function is called a model. In some cases, it is a very simple polynomial. It's a very simple linear equation. In some cases, it's a polynomial equation, and then essentially that is the intelligence. That is generalization of the input data to correlate it with output data and say this is the map. And that is essentially um, machine learning. These types of machine learning, there is something called supervised. That quickly supervised learning is when you give the data, but you also label the data. For example, you give some mail and say this is spam, some other mail and say this is not spam, and system takes millions of such mail, and then from there it infers what are the things that make a mail message a spam message and what makes a mail message not a spam message. So unsupervised learning is where you have no labels. And that is an area which is constantly now, I think it's like becoming very, very important. And the unsupervised deep learning is also another fertile area, but they are not very mature. I mean, I've had a lot of frustrating experiences in trying to get some unsupervised learning methods to work properly, either because of my ignorance or because of the state of the art. And there are a whole bunch of unsolved problems in this space. So every time I say unsolved problems in this space, they're all opportunities, right? So unsupervised learning is the major difference is in one case, you have labels that say that if given this set of inputs, this is how you classify it. If you so in the case of spam, if it contains words like bank, Nigeria, this, that, and all that, it's spam. Or it says, it mostly, if you really generalize it, most of the spam email wants you to take an action. And most of the emails, other emails may or may not ask you to take action. So, that is just one feature. Um, Reinforcement learning is an interesting area. Is reinforcement learning is neither like supervised or unsupervised learning, but essentially you set a goal, and mostly, it's currently heavily used in robotics and other kind of automated vehicles. You set a goal, say, perform this goal and learn by yourself. And so the first humanoid robot Japan was building fell down several times, but success over a period of time it learned and then climbed the stairs. And the interesting thing is that it learn means it doesn't learn like human beings. We have a problem thinking that, hey, learning means the way we learn. The way machines learn is very different. So what they do is they have memories of lots of different things that didn't work, and because they are machines, they can do things like million times faster. And when I go to AlphaGo and other kinds of things, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail. So the deep learning, even though it's considered under the same umbrella as machine learning, it's a specialized type of implementation of machine learning. You will hear this term again and again in the industry, and it is the current thing. Deep learning is what made speech recognition possible, language understanding possible. I mean, language is not really truly understood, but to whatever extent it is being understood, it is possible. And the reason is deep learning is built using neural networks and what is called deep artificial neural networks, and it's kind of almost like magic, right? And the a simple program for a neural net is recognizing these digits that I talked about, which is a small data set of about like 800, 768, I think, images it can figure out and then recognize human handwriting. Um, so deep learning is a fascinating field. Neural networks use examples to infer patterns. So you give them some examples of handwriting, it somehow figures out. And I can actually explain to you how it figures out, but I don't think we have the time. So let us go through the impact thing. And if I have time, we'll come back. Embedded intelligence is kind of thing that may be interest to this lab and a whole bunch of others, because we are now trying to build devices. One of the biggest areas of a lot of intelligence can be um, used is to intelligence, what they call it, the edge. And so that you don't have to send back all the data to a central machine or to the cloud, through the cloud and servers, and process them and send it back. So they're trying, you can build the models and then you can deploy them on these edge machines. And think about the autocorrect feature that you have on your phone. If you turn it on, of course it makes lots of mistakes, but it autocorrects it. When I type the name, if I say good morning to somebody every day, and when I say good morning, that the person's name appears, because it's very heavily personalized. It's a model of predicting what is the next word I'm going to type or I have been typing. So it's probabilistic in nature, but it's a very, very interesting one. It is an edge device because it doesn't run on GPUs and huge processors and all that. Even though I think maybe in 5 to 10 years that is one thing that may happen. But the IoT devices, the artificial intelligence in IoT devices are, there's a area of a lot of interesting developments are taking place. They are also called smart devices because they can perceive. I don't think they can think, but they can take action, right? And then they can constantly learn from what they perceive, and the perception happens through the senses. Our human perception happens through, obviously vision and speech, I mean, sound and all that kind of stuff, and touch. So artificial narrow intelligence is where we are right now. It's narrow intelligence because a lot of this intelligence that is developed for one application, it cannot be transferred to another application. AlphaGo is, in case you have not heard, Go is a you know game, a board game like chess, but lot more possibilities, and nobody thought machines could solve it. And there is this company called DeepMind that solved it, and that's like, I mean, the techniques they've used just like unbelievable. I just want to mention one thing about Go. I think there was a Move 34 or something like that. Lee Sedol was the human expert in Go at that time, and it beat him. I think in 3 games he was beaten twice. And there was one move when all the Go experts were watching this game and they expected it to do some move, but it did some entirely different move. And then Racer got up and thought about it for a while. He came back and played, and he knew he had lost the game, I believe, at that point in time. And this move is different from all. So it is not just learned from experts. It was able to come up with something entirely different. And that is the true promise that we are going to see. The thinking in ways that we don't think. I don't know whether we can use the word think in that particular thing. Coming up with possibilities. It's not just a combination of lots of complex things kind of thing. It's something much more than that, slightly more intelligent. Autonomous vehicles are, I would call them right now semi-autonomous vehicles, because the amount of training data they have is not enough. If you happen to visit Silicon Valley, and if you travel around Mountain View and Palo Alto area, you'll see these Google cars going around. Previously, they are not Google, but now they split it off as a different company. There is a human driver sitting next to it, because if you let an automated car into the traffic, it will cause panic. So there is this person who is not driving, who's sitting in the car. So there is a human presence, and the car learns as it drives its way through. And I mean, there are some mistakes that are made, some accidents that happen with Tesla and others also. So we are still not ready for full 100% automation, but it does quite a good job of doing that. That you cannot take that intelligence and, for example, and put it in AlphaGo, or take it and put it in some other place kind of thing. Industrial robotics are very special purpose ones that have the original ones were not that intelligent, but they're progressively becoming more and more intelligent. Almost all the predictive analytics you do, whether it's a stock price prediction, they're all like financial industry, fintech industry is one of the ones that are switching to very heavily into a lot of these machine learning techniques for doing it. Recommendation systems, we all know work, right? I buy a lot of books just because Amazon recommends it. And they seem to recommend the right books because he says, oh, you've read this author before, you rated it high. Your friend who reads similar books to yours, like 70% of the time, read this book, and so it may be worth taking a look at. And the recommendation is there for music, for books, for movies. Netflix, for example, came into existence just because of the recommendation system, and of course, also because of the great streaming video kind of stuff. Conversation agents, and we'll talk about it. They're both narrow as well as general intelligence. We'll talk about that in a minute. The artificial general intelligence is what people are trying to talk about in terms of human level intelligence. The humans, if a machine can can behave like a human in any circumstance, even in untrained things, like for example, something falls, we instinctively bend and pick it up before it touches the floor. If it's going to break, wherever possible, and that's not something that people train for. That's not the data that was given to human beings, but human beings seem to do it. So that level of intelligence, a lot of people think machines cannot reach that level of intelligence. I tell you one aspect where I don't think it'll reach for foreseeable future. But if you survey a lot of experts, they'll say anything between 5 to 50 years, depending on whom you are. The most optimistic ones think about 5 years, and the most pessimistic ones think that never. And somewhere in between, say, hey, it's possible to be 50 if these things happen, for example. So artificial general intelligence is this. Artificial superintelligence, let us not talk about that. This is the Skynet scenario, or you know, all these like. So let us come to the impact. I think doing okay. I'll probably take 5 minutes. You look at the impact in short term, medium term, and long term. And when I'm talking about this impact, I want you to think about how does it apply to the products that you're building, the services that you're providing, what is happening right now, where do you need to catch up, what, where can you leapfrog, how can you leverage these technologies. Ultimately, artificial intelligence, ML, they are tools. And let us keep them there at this point in time. We can have long debates on whether they're tools or they're going to be our bosses or whatever. That's a different discussion, and that can take several days, and still will not reach a conclusion because that's happening elsewhere. But let us just look at what is happening in the short term. Say, when I say short term, I mean now. It's happening right now. Auto correction I mentioned in your phone. If you turn it on, it will automatically correct. If you're used Gmail, I don't know if that happens with other mail clients. Auto response, smart responses. If you turn on smart response, it will actually give you a response to an email, a boilerplate email, and it is not customized response, and it does a pretty good job. I test it sometimes to just see how smart it is. Just looking at my email for probably the last 10, 15 years, looking at it means no human being is actually looking at it. Machine is looking at it and then analyzing it and say, hey, this is how he responds to this type of mail. And it's not exactly the same person. Then it's very easy to reproduce. You know, when the customer support question comes, let me take a look and say, I'll get back to you. And it automatically auto fills. So this auto correct, auto suggest, auto filling, all that is happening right now. And that is a very interesting, technology, Markov chains, and some version of it has been around for a long time. But they are getting better and better. And this is predictive texting. That is one. Grammar and style checker. There is one called Grammarly, which is very popular. I use another one called ProEdit Pro, and I'm amazed at how good it is in correcting my language. When I write, I don't write a blog post without checking it. It'll come back and give me the style corrections. I mean, typos and spelling checks and simple grammar, many of them can do. But this one it talks about the readability score, how easy it is to read, active versus passive, very, very interesting ones. If you don't have, you just should go on to this Write Edit Pro or Grammarly. They have trial versions and just try out, and you'll be blown away by how much, how intelligent they are. And parts of them are rule based, but parts of them are also um, run by machine learning algorithms. Object recognition, we already talked about. It's the most, there is something called YOLO. You can see, it can recognize objects. There are hilarious circumstances where certain objects it cannot recommend. I mean, if you turn it upside down or do something else, there are all these systems that can extract, create captions out of pictures, describe scenes. They do amazingly well for a machine, and for somebody who cannot even write that program. I can tell you that it's like really, really good. And of course, they're not perfect. None of these are perfect. That is another thing in challenges we'll talk about. Singleton conversational interfaces. Singleton means you ask a question, it will give you an answer. Your next question has no relationship with your previous question. Anybody who has used Alexa, it's Amazon Echo, is very good. So recommend me a song. What is the weather like? What is the height of Mount Everest? What is the difference between a tablespoon and a tea? Whatever. And all these kinds of things, it has a knowledge. It gathers from the net, and then it answers the question. Whatever questions it doesn't answer, it'll go back, learn, and do this kind of thing. But they're very, very limited. The chatbots, if you use, you're bound to be frustrated because still we are not at a level where they can do what is called a multi-turn conversation. Like, for example, I say, hey, I'm looking for jobs in Java in Chennai, and they say, oh, there are 50 jobs, but I'm looking for, being paid like some 20 lakhs per year. and then it says, oh, there are 3 of these jobs that pay this much. Can you tell me what are the skill sets that are required? And said, yeah, they have most of the skills that you have, except that they may also want you to learn Scala, which is like a Java, functional programming kind of stuff. So this kind of conversations, which is like every question is related to previous question in some way, or remember in the context, they're very, very limited right now. They're getting better, but they're nowhere near where they should be. Predictions, we have seen all kinds of interesting predictions, because prediction is one of the early problems that people solved. There is entire books written on predictive analytics. Recommendations we talked about earlier. It's very easy to do. Medium term is again things that are in the works but not deployed fully, only being experimented on. Drug discovery, and it's kind of very interesting when you read it. I don't know much about the domain, but I can see a lot of interesting patterns emerging. Right? There are like uh, Google says that you can, by looking at your eye, I can tell you whether you have diabetes. And then later I found out that when I go to the doctor, they have this peripheral neuropathy, and all it is camera takes pictures of my eyes. And if I have diabetes, like certain nerves have this what are called microaneurysms, and it's a microaneurysm detection kind of stuff. It's when you dig deeper and deeper and deeper, you understand basically what is happening. But it almost seems like magic. Drug discovery, disease, diagnosis. They're still not deployed. Still, a human expert has to take a look and say, okay, this is fine. But they can augment human intelligence, because they are now able to detect 250 different types of cancers at a much earlier stage than they could. The radiology labs are using machine learning systems for detecting things that are. See, the interesting part of it is doing anomaly detection is very easy for machines to do. So that's something they do. GPT-3 you would have heard about, and there's also a lot of hype. I played around with it a little bit but I got a beta after a very, very long time. It writes stories, it does, but it's nowhere. I mean, it's nowhere near where it should be. But it's a very interesting direction to see. There is a GPT-3 for those of you who do not know. It's a general purpose technology. It's text, and what they have done is they've trained a huge language model. They created some billions of parameters they've used to have a huge neural network, a deep neural network, and fed it with all the data they could lay their hands on the internet. And then the technology is supposed to do human. If you say write me a science fiction story on neutron stars, it'll be able to write that kind of stuff. And it's nowhere near where it should be, but it's definitely a fascinating thing to follow. Um, and then there are now a lot of competitors. GPT-3 is kind of closed. It's being sold through Microsoft. So, but there are a whole bunch of open source efforts that do something very similar. But you don't need GPT-3 level of intelligence. You can do, if you are working in healthcare, you want the domain intelligence of healthcare only. So you can train your model with less data, with more specific, domain expertise, and then you should be able to do a lot of things. Explainable AI is there are a lot of attempts at it. The AI is a black box. You give it some data, it goes and comes back, and then it does some predictions, and then you correct it, and then we go through a loop, and automatically. Initially, humans used to do it. Now humans are not even there in the picture. There are technologies like AutoML that do it, and you will be like surprised at how good they get. But we have no idea. It spits out an equation or a model, and you have no idea what that is. It's completely, black box. So everybody said, "Hey, we can't do that because auditors will ask, how did you make this decision?" The government agencies will come and ask. So you need to build explainability into the AI, And the interesting thing is, for me, more than three dimensions is very difficult to conceive. These one are n-dimensional hypercubes and things like that. Even if it gives me an explanation, I don't know whether I'll be able to understand as a human being. So there is an interesting challenge right there. The model portability, I already talked about the models that you build for one cannot be ported to others. That is changing. There is this entire transformer technology that makes you to take reuse models across different kind of things. And the most important thing is learning with lot less data. There are all these efforts going on in this direction. Each one is a huge opportunity. It's not, each one is an industry by itself, right? Or a sub-segment of a larger industry, depending on what you look at it. Long-term trends, this is just things to dream about. I brought explainability back here. Explainability in a See, I don't know if you work with databases. I can go to a database and then I do a query and then it'll come and give me the results and I can say explain, and it'll tell you how it actually got that results. What paths it went through and all that sort of stuff. So you can tune the query optimizer. Similarly, in the AI, there will be something that you'll be able to interact with us in the future. Maturity of AI as a service. Right now, it is available from a few cloud providers like Google and Amazon and Microsoft and IBM and a few others. Uh, think about it as a SaaS product. So I don't have to know anything about it. I plug in my input and I just get this output. I plug in all the customers who visited, all the people who visited my website, how many showed some interest and fell off, and how many people actually converted to a paying product. I can take that data and then upload it, and it'll come back and say, these are the reasons why people convert. That will be a huge jump in marketing. Martech does things like this. Okay, long-term trends impact is bias detection. Right now, there is a lot of bias. Bias need not necessarily means it's like wrongdoing by some people. It's just that the old data that we used, if you go back and read some of the books, all references were to males. So if you use that data, it's going to be all male-based reference, right? If you look at the analysis of all the credit, loan applications that were sanctioned, it was all to certain class of people. What is there? What are the rules? The rules are, hey, how much does this person earn? Is he able to? What is the risk involved? Is he or able to pay back and this and that? But those things have changed. But what we are working with is old data, and the new data is not there yet. So there are biases creep in. So you need to be very, very cognizant of the bias, and then there are whole groups that are trying to find out, how to fix this bias problem. Discovery, like this Lee Sedol's like Move 34 or whatever it is I was talking about, is that hey, how can you discover things that you never would discover as a human being? Can machines help you do that kind of thing? And then I talked about multi-turn conversations. The Turing test, if this has to be better than a Turing test. And if I take any one of you and then you replace you with a machine and I carry on a conversation, and then we know what are the common things between the two of us, and any reference I can give, they should be able to pull it out and then have an intelligent conversation. We are not there yet, and it'll take a while. And I think I repeated explainable AI by mistake. Models as components. So we still like building models, still taking data and still doing this kind of thing because we're building very, very task specific models at this point in time. So can we build more generic models that can be reused, and or certain models as components and build higher building blocks using that kind of thing? Learning with less data is a continuous goal. Ideally, human beings think about it. You take a kid, you show him a ball, he says ball, and then and then show him a bigger ball, and he'll say ball. Then show him a moon, he'll say ball. What I'm saying is that there is somewhere that abstraction is taking place in the mind of the kid, whereas for me, for the let the machine recognize a ball, I need like 10,000 examples of a ball, beach ball, this football. soccer, all those kinds of things, right? It's because I mean machines are nowhere near where humans are, but things are happening, which they're all moving in the right direction. There are a lot of interesting research is going on in this space. So I call out very specific opportunities. Embedded intelligence is an area where, for healthcare, for all these smart things like smart devices, smart cities, smart sensors, and all that kind of stuff. And you will see intelligence at the edge. Vertically, instead of training these huge general purpose models, can we train very special purpose models, which may be considered as narrow AI, but very very good at doing one thing at a time. And can you have several such ones for each one of the verticals? And there is a lot of work going on there. So you can pick your area, and then you can go and if you take each one of these medical professions and see what they do and specialists do. And I mean, it's not a question of replacement. What are the areas where there could be misleading, signals that they get it, and see whether you can do something different. And the other one is that my favorite example is something like Amazon and eBay. When the internet was formed, there is a whole bunch of applications that came out. But these two applications, they could not have existed without web. They could not, without internet, without web, there is no possibility of such applications. It is not just an enabler, it was a necessity. So there is a whole class of such applications you will see that will be enabled only because AI works, right? AI as infrastructure. Ultimately, I think AI will become an infrastructure. It's like, you know, um, and I don't want to go deep into it, but think about your entire company email is AI driven. You don't have to have special reports on any crisis, looming crisis. Combine it with prediction, combine it with recommendations. You should be able to get a executive dashboard that tells you, hey, this is what happened. But for that, I need to be able to look at every one of the email, not personal email. Let them, anyway, they should not be using company account kind of stuff. But all the interactions that happen in the companies, there are a few companies that are working in this space. Challenges are many. The biggest challenge is dirty data, and I just want to do a clustering of tweets, and the amount of stuff I had to go through, 70-80% of my time was spent cleaning up the tweets. So the real life data is very dirty, and it's not all uniform. So the right now the data engineers are more in demand. In fact, most of the data science professionals end up doing data engineering jobs. Then bias we talked about, lack of explainability we talked about. The thing is, we are in a probabilistic world. We are in a Boolean world before. It was a yes or no. Now it's a maybe, like 70% probability that this will happen. We need to, as human beings, we need to get to grips with that, and you should be able to understand it, and you should accept it. And that is going to be a big issue. You know, when you put a money in your bank, you said it's not like 70% probability that it is there kind of thing is not acceptable. So for many class of applications, you can forget about AI based stuff, but they are more like operational kind of thing, which has already been automated. Lack of understanding to separate hype from reality is going to be another one of the challenges. Because every AI pilot, there are gazillion AI, the ratio of the pilots to actually deployed applications are very, very small because of various reasons. So don't, when you are saying, I know that every startup wants to put AI in their thing, but just be, if you come to me, I'll ask you 5, 6 questions that I can figure out exactly whether you're using AI or you just like, put that label there and trying to figure out what to do next kind of stuff. So just be very clear about what you're going to do. What is the goal? How is it going to improve? What is the metrics you're going to use to track it? How are you going to continuously learn when the data changes? All that kind of stuff. So what are the areas where AI can explicitly, the innovation itself, like idea validation. Yeah, when I type an idea, imagine these are all like dream machines, right? Like a dream AI machine. I can type my idea. It'll ask me a set of series of questions. I can type in my pitch, like you're saying, I will give you a simple pitch, then I'll give you a one para description. Same thing that you go through with a mentor. You think about a virtual mentor or AI mentor where it'll ask you questions and you start typing. And then you can say, hey, there are 10 some similar ideas. But the percentage overlap is this. The chance of your success is this. All that kind of stuff, it can come back and tell me. So it doesn't mean I have to stop that idea, but I can start. If I have 10 different ideas, I can evaluate these ideas. Think about, it's a startup tool that you can have. A customer identification. Once you have an idea, a product, and I have a few customers, and then I give all the data to the machine, and it can say, okay, go to all these places to find the new customers. And these are all the different ways in which they can use it. Levels of automation for mundane tasks that we do a lot of useless work, which we have to do um, as startups and as product groups, that machines can, they're not taking over our life, they're just making us spend more time on more valuable things. Research assistants, for example, I want to know what is the impact of AI on innovation. I should be able to give it a bot that can go and figure out all the things, do several Google searches, condense all the results, not show me that there are 10 million results. It doesn't tell me anything. Tell me what is there in the 10 million results. And give me small summaries and that kind of stuff. And, tell me things that I can, stories that I can use in my presentation. So these research assistants are an interesting set of bots. We'll have better risk assessment and prediction. So we can say, if I'm going to spend this much of money on marketing, say, hey, but that may not be enough because compared to your competitors, this is how much they spend, all that kind of stuff. And there is a whole class of these. They're all built using prediction, all well-known applications of machine learning. And then new tools, and I can't even think of these tools because my imagination doesn't extend that far. When cloud came around, when the internet came around, if you ask me what internet would do for you, I'd say better email and better search. And my limited imagination, that's what I would have thought of. But internet came and did things that I didn't even expect it to do. Same thing with mobile devices. I can't imagine the 84-year-old mother uses a mobile device and does Skype conversations, and now, of course, Zoom and Google Meet conversations with her, great grandchildren. I would never have thought such things were possible. Voice-based operating systems, and this whole class. So there is this, stuff that you can't even think about, but lots of interesting possibilities exist. A few people will see these opportunities, and they'll go from there. With that, I stop my monologue. We exceeded the time, but we started a bit late. So I did it in 45 minutes. I can take questions. Sumitra, you need to control. I can make this presentation if you send me an email. I can send it to you. These are all. There's a bunch of technical slides after this, but let me go back to Meetup. Did I stop sharing?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So maybe we can take questions. So there is a two question from the chat box. So one question from my side. So what are the best AI healthcare solutions to improve the patient experience?
What are the best AI solutions to improve?
Solutions to improve the patient experience.
Yeah, the patient experience is a very, very big term, no?
So this is in terms of healthcare, sir. So most of the participants will be in the healthcare domain.
No, I think I'll start with some technical answers, and then we can. The experience is a wide spectrum of things, right? If you can make it really, really easy for them to take their mobile device and get literally everything they want to do, right? Whether they want to see a doctor, whether they want to get, when the last session, what they were told. I normally go to a doctor, he looks at my, previous reports and he mumbles something, then he tells me to do certain things, and I walk out and I forget half of what he told me. And they also uh, use unexplainable terms kind of stuff. And so one of them is to sometimes doctors may not tell you everything because they don't want to scare you, because some of them are possibilities kind of thing. So as a patient, I want more knowledge is one thing, more access. So not necessarily always from the doctor, but from, let us say, a doctor's assistant, which could be a virtual assistant where I can ask all kinds of questions. And if there are stock answers, like for example, like I take some medicine, they say, okay, take it after a meal. I don't know whether I should take it 5 minutes after the meal, 15 minutes after the meal, 30 minutes after the meal. I'd wait till the next visit to find out. And what happens if I forget to take it after the meal? Should I take it whenever I remember? I mean, there is a whole bunch of these kinds of things where I'm talking about outpatients, right? And inpatients are slightly different kind of category. So the best way to find the AI, is used in customer care a lot. So we can take parallels from there. Right? So there are different levels of uh, what is called service. I'm really something this is critical for me, really upset, really urgent, and I want somebody's attention. Some of them are more informational, that kind of thing. So if you can, I'll start out with a very simple categorization of all the requests patients have. How do they express the request right now? They probably ring a bell and call the nurse if they're an inpatient and ask. If it's a doctor, do you have access? Do doctors even look at email? Do they answer email? Do you have access? No. For me, only in the next visit I can get some things clarified, kind of stuff. So that we'll start there. It need not be a doctor who may be answering these emails too. It could be, simple questions can be answered by different levels, maybe automation at one level, human assisted automation, human in the loop is the next level, and then maybe, escalated doctors because the time is very, very valuable kind of stuff. So I would start with classification of problems, which is very important. So that itself will give you an idea about what are the, and then classification in terms of what is urgent, what is important, what is critical, what is non-critical, that kind of stuff. And because sometimes patients are telling you things that you should not ignore. In fact, one of the doctors told me, I listen to my patients, I just let them talk, and they tell me everything I want to know. I said, I don't believe sometimes all these machines and all this sort of stuff. And so, is there an avenue for patients to talk to doctors? Uh, so, or a proxy of a doctor, and maybe that is an area where I'll start.
Thank you, sir. So there is another question, sir. So what will be the impact of artificial intelligence in IT companies?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question, and it's also kind of loaded question because um, there is a paper you can just go and look at called Software 2.0. So gone are the days when we are building systems where we know exactly how to solve problems. We are going to build new systems, and I'm now projecting myself into the next few decades, right? Mars rover, we don't know what problems it's going to face. How do you make it a learning machine? Like, how do you make it learn instead of these round trip communication, that kind of thing? So that's not an IT problem as yet. But I'm talking about I'm going to the edge to come back, right? What do you do when an anomaly is detected? What is your escalation process? When do you know when your security is breached? Okay, there is a whole class of previously this doesn't get detected till it's a little bit late. Otherwise, why would such big intelligent companies will say 45 million contacts were stolen after the horse has left the barn or whatever? So why wasn't there a predictive um, you know intelligent product that kind of looks at various kinds of things. And so security is one area where artificial intelligence is going to be used a lot. Um, is already happening in many places, intersection of these kinds of things. As far as IT is concerned, I would say, hey, what have we done? And I looked at myself. I've been in the industry. I wrote my first program in 1972 in assembly language, and today I'm writing stuff in Python, more for fun than anything else. And if I look at it, we went through languages, but we're not substantially made ourselves into a very high level developers, right? What would that high level developer mean? One is high level languages, but programming languages is only part of the problem. What are the other things that you can do? From the code, can you generate automated tests and then identify gaps? Does anybody use code analyzers? Can code analyzers be smarter? Can people ask questions and get answers, smarter answers through tutor bots or other kinds of chat bots? There's a whole class of, this is a big topic that's worth just one session talking about on AI in IT itself. And the IT people will be the first to use it because they also know how to build these systems and doing that kind of thing. That's why there is a demand supply gap is so huge in this. But right now, everybody is requiring a PhD or somebody to build models kind of stuff. But we'll see many of these jobs coming to data engineers and others, and you will see some very interesting requirements for skills. Right now, I need to know the domain. How can I quickly find the essential part of a domain? For example, how do I know how to analyze a problem that I've never analyzed before? Where do I go for help? And so that's an area where I think.
Thank you, sir. So in the interest of time, we will take the last question from the Indumati, sir. So Indumati, could you unmute and you can go ahead with your question?
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, I see. The image classification will training machine with a lot of only images, more accuracy. Feature extraction data is mandatory. Okay, one thing, there are a couple of things, right? With the deep learning, feature extraction is automatic.
Yes, sir.
So, so what happens is so there are some techniques, right? Now there are unsupervised learning, what are called semi-supervised learning, about which I didn't talk about. The semi-supervised models will actually give you the feature extraction, and actually they'll do partial labeling. So they'll take partial labels that already exist and then do the come up with recommendations. But there is a whole class of things called latent variables that, latent features, hidden features that are not explicit features in the inputs themselves, getting that kind of thing. So for my image classification, depending on, you can provide some context that may make it better to some extent. And
Sir, without extracting data, only with I have only a lot of images. Only with the images is it possible to do the classification, sir, without extracting data?
Yeah, but it's still initially you're going to give a bunch of, let's say, tree pictures and say this is neem tree, right? So somebody is going to label them. When you classify them, that is actually a supervised learning algorithm, right? Ultimately, you say, okay, this is tree, this is street, this is bus, this is car, this is human, all that kind of stuff, right? Identify parts of an image, but that's a problem that has been mostly solved, right? With ImageNet data, they've been doing that, and there is no data that is given along with it. The image itself is the data.
Yes, sir. Actually, in image processing, medical image processing, we used to collect data like energy, homogeneity, some kind of stuff. We take the features and we work it. But my question is like only with the images I have, I don't take any extraction. So will it be possible? That is what I am trying to figure it out, sir. Whether it is possible to train the only with the images and get it.
So there is, you could try with an unsupervised learning model to find anomalies, saying that, let us say a healthy heart and unhealthy heart. These are all the differences that come. But I think initially human has to be in the loop. You can do it without labeling the data. Is that what you are asking? Is that it just looks at some red blob? Yeah.
Labeling is something, the output what I am going to predict from the training, right, sir? So my question
No,
is
but okay,
for
let
training,
me not
only
use
for,
the word labeling. I said tagging the data, right? Essentially,
yes,
you're
sir.
associating features with the data. For example,
Yes.
so if I roughly show something that is heart-shaped, how does the system know it's heart, right?
Yes,
Somebody,
sir.
right? And the system cannot figure it out by itself. Right? System has
So
to be
data
taught.
is required, right, sir? Right, data is
Yeah.
required.
So
Feature data,
in
features
some form, it is required. Yeah.
required. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Indumathy. And we came
I
to
think
the
there was one question on the feedback from the link. Let me go and try to run that program, and I'll email the feedback to you so you can distribute it to people. Mujib wanted that, right? So normally it should come out as a word cloud. I'm there's not enough data. So let me try to figure out how to get it out. I knew we used a different application that was very easy to showing it immediately. So okay, all right. Let me do that. So any other questions, you can email it to me. You have my email ID, askdorai@gmail.com. Dorai is spelled as DORAI, not DURAI, at gmail.com, and you can shoot me any questions. And Indumati, I'll also take a look at your question a little bit deeper and see
Yes, sir.
how it is being done, because I mostly work with text.
Okay,
So
okay.
I don't want to give you the wrong answer.
Thanks, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
But intuitively, I know that, at some point in time, you have to tell the system what the object is, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Indumathy. So in the interest of time, we are closing the session, sir. And thank you for sharing your knowledge with the participants. I hope the participants will grab the knowledge from your experience. And once again, thank you for doing this session during the flood time. And I would also thank Muthulakshmi for hosting this session. Would you like to say any closing remarks before we close the session, sir?
No, the only thing that I can say is that if you want a copy of the presentation, just send me an email. If you have specific questions, send me an email. If you have any feedback, include it in that email. Even if you give me feedback, I'll still give you the presentation. But I prefer to get not negative feedback, but how it can be improved next time.
Yes, sir. So as a practice, we will usually upload the session videos in our YouTube channel. So hope that is fine with you.
Yeah, that should be fine. Yeah.
Okay, sir. So once again, thank you for your support and time for doing this session, sir. So we have created a feedback link for the session. So I have posted the feedback form in the chat box. So we request the participants to fill the feedback, and which can improve our future sessions. And we will be taking a break for the Christmas and New Year, and we will start a new series of Knowledge Tuesday session from January onwards. And thank you for joining the today's session, and thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Yeah. You done closing the conference?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, and have a good day. Bye.